Curt Cignetti denies report he's pushing for Vanderbilt's Mark Byington to be Indiana coach, the Indiana basketball coach. Now, I thought it was funny before this conspiracy came out. There were people saying that Curt Cignetti could become the Indiana basketball coach. Now, that was funny. I was like, really? Like, are we actually doing this right now? Like, Curt Cignetti cannot be the head basketball coach and the head football coach. That's not feasible. Plus, I don't think Curt Cignetti knows that much about basketball. I mean, I'm sure he knows, enough to probably be able to coach like Little League or something. But, I don't think Curt Cignetti should be the Indiana basketball coach. Now, I know a lot of IU fans were memeing like, hey, he'd do better than Woody. You know what? I maybe wouldn't doubt that. IU has been pretty bad the last couple of years in basketball, but still. But to get into the meat and potatoes of this, though, the reason why this is not shocking, you see Vanderbilt's Mark Byington, and you're like, well, why are people saying Curt Cignetti would even be pushing for this? The reason why is because Mark Byington was the James Madison head basketball coach. If you recall, James Madison made the NCAA tournament this past year, and he got the Vanderbilt job because of the job he did at James Madison. And Curt Cignetti was at James Madison when Mark Byington was at James Madison. So they know each other because obviously, head coaches of different athletics team, programs out of school are going to run into each other. They know each other. So Mark Byington gets the Vanderbilt job. Well deserved. And you look at Vanderbilt, they're in a better position for the tournament than Indiana is. And Indiana spent over $5 million on their roster. How much has Vanderbilt spent on their basketball roster? Probably not a whole lot. So very impressive stuff what Mark Byington has done. And actually, legitimately, he is a candidate for the job. Now, do I think he's going to get the job? No. But what it just makes this so interesting, though, is that people are saying Curt Cignetti would be pushing for this. For one thing, I don't think, Curt Cignetti, behind the scenes is now I don't know. I can't say. This is just me saying. This is just my opinion. I don't know for sure. I could be completely wrong, and if I am, I'll say that I am, in future shows when we get more information. But in my opinion, I just don't think that Curt Cignetti is all that concerned with the basketball team's affairs right now. I mean, he's the head coach of the football team, and it's his second year. It's not like he's been with the school now for 6-7 years and Indiana football is rolling, and maybe he's got some time to sit back and be like, you know what? Let me take a look at Indiana basketball for a little bit. He's got to make sure Indiana football doesn't have a letdown year. Like he's got to make sure that this past season wasn't a fluke, right? So Indiana football, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that Curt Cignetti has to do. I mean, you saw when he got the job how, like, he had all this stuff on his desk. He took a picture of his desk, like his checklist. Like, he's busy all the time. So I just don't really think that he's really that involved with this. Like I said, I could be completely wrong. Maybe he is, but I don't see it. Now, if Mark Byington does get the job, then that's going to reopen the argument that Curt Cignetti had something to do with it. Because is it a coincidence that, a former James Madison coach would get the job, or, or did Curt Cignetti actually have some involvement with it? I don't know. All I know is that, in my opinion, I think Scott Dolson, the athletic director for Indiana, just needs to do his job, just like he did with Curt Cignetti, and hire the best person for the job that he thinks. Now, that person could end up not working out for the 80th time for Indiana basketball, like all the other failed coaches, but that's what he needs to do. There doesn't need to be any involvement from Curt Cignetti. There doesn't need to be any involvement from Quinn Buckner, Calvert Chaney, or any of the other people involved with Indiana, basketball, or just any Indiana athletics in general. Scott Dolson needs to sit and he needs to look at every available coach that he thinks is a candidate for the job, and just start narrowing it down from coaches that say no. I mean, I'd ask everybody. I mean, I agree. Like, people saying like, oh, Brad Stevens. Yeah, Brad Stevens wasn't going to happen. That was a joke. I knew it wasn't going to happen. It didn't happen last time. It's not going to happen now. He's got one of the best jobs in America at the Celtics. Why would he take the Indiana job? But if you ask, you ask. It doesn't hurt. What do people always say? It doesn't hurt to ask. So just ask. But he's not going to take the job. It's just no way. Absolutely not. And honestly, I think it's crazy how quickly he turned it down this time. With words, I understand people, well, he just said it in words. Doesn't mean it's true. I think it's true. I don't think that Brad Stevens is considering Indiana at all. But I just think it's crazy that he turned it down as quickly as he did publicly, because the last, 4 years ago, last time Indiana needed a coach, it was a lot later in the cycle. Obviously, Mike Woodson, announcing he's not coming back. It's earlier than when Archie Miller got fired, but like it didn't really last that long with the Brad Stevens hype. Definitely, he shot it down quick. But then you got a lot of other coaches. You got your Dusty Mays. You got people are still throwing around Nate Oates and Scott Drew. I'll laugh at that. I mean, the Kentucky job was just open. You think, I mean, I know Indiana fans don't want to hear this, but if you think that those guys turned down the Kentucky job, that they go to Indiana, I mean, Kentucky, in probably the eyes of 99% of Americans, is a better job than Indiana. Even though I don't like saying that, but it is. I mean, Kentucky's got more titles. They've been relevant recently. They're still good right now. That they got Mark Pope. Indiana hasn't been good in forever. Indiana is one of the 5 to 7 best programs in college basketball, but they got to get back to winning. They just got to hire somebody that's actually going to get them to the tournament and get to Sweet 16s and Elite 8s again. Then we'll talk. Then we can get back in the discussion. Indiana's been rough, man. They got to get a lot better. And I just don't think any of those guys are candidates. And a guy like Rick Pitino, I mean, even with all the allegations and the stuff that's happened in the past, I mean, he's old. I wouldn't do that either. Just like people were throwing around, John Beilein 4 years ago. I wouldn't go after someone really old. I know Cignetti's older, but it's not the same thing. I mean, Cignetti still has a lot of, youth and vibrancy and energy in him. Other guys, I mean, Rick Pitino still is fire, but I mean, he's really old. I wouldn't do that. There's just a lot of coaches that I wouldn't even consider, or Indiana won't have a shot to get. It just kind of narrows it down. Then you start getting to the more attainable options like Chris Beard or Buzz Williams or even Mark Byington or the McCollum guy at Drake. There are attainable coaches. It's going to be interesting. But regardless, I hope this, report is false. Like Curt Cignetti denied it, but I hope it's false. I don't want any involvement for the head coaching job, not even from Curt Cignetti. Like Curt Cignetti, fantastic football coach, and I hope he does great things in Indiana for, many years to come. But I don't want anybody involved. I don't want any scandals. Indiana basketball does not need scandals. They've had way too many with the Kelvin Sampson stuff. A lot of people trashing Woody behind the scenes. The Tom Crean stuff with the AD back then, Fred Glass. There's just so much stuff that has gone wrong with Indiana basketball over the last 25 years since Bob Knight was fired. Yet another scandal. They do not need any more scandals like, oh my gosh, Mark Byington got the job because Curt Cignetti said to hire him with his suggestion. Then Indiana hires him. He doesn't work out. And then, Cignetti, he did it. It's his fault. It was his suggestion. He ruined Indiana basketball. Kind of like they're saying with Quinn Buckner is the one that wanted Mike Woodson, and it's his fault. You don't need any of that. You don't see this at other programs. You do not need that. Indiana basketball does not need that. Scott Dolson just needs to sit down, hire somebody that will consider the job and who he thinks is the best candidate for the job, and hopefully that guy does a good job so Indiana basketball can finally start winning again on a consistent basis. But they do not need any more, instances like this where, conflict arises out of, something that shouldn't even be there. I don't think Curt Cignetti's involved with the Indiana basketball job. I kind of think it's humorous and hilarious, but then when you really dive deep down into it, it isn't something Indiana needs. So if Mark Byington isn't being the head coach, that's cool. Hopefully it works out. Don't think it would be a terrible hire. I would pick other people over him, but definitely don't want it to be because of any involvement with Curt Cignetti. But we'll see. Definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with that, and definitely we'll update on this story if we get any more information.